Retired.
Good evening, members of the public, Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvick, and members of the Monroe Township Board of Education. The Monroe Township Board of Education Organization meeting is now called to order. In accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, the Monroe Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted December 30th, 2016 at all schools, the Home News Tribune, the Cranberry Press, and filed with the clerk of the municipality. This is a unique meeting where it begins without a board president as chair, and as board secretary, it's my role to chair the meeting until such time as a successful nomination for president occurs. Should we not succeed, then hopefully we'll have a successful nomination for vice president, and they would chair the meeting until a president is chosen. That would happen only in the event of a tie. So would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving right along with the agenda, item number 4 is the election results. The results have been sent to all board members, and copies are available on the front desk for members of the public. The election results have been confirmed and certified by the county. It is now my duty to administer the oath of office to the following individuals who are hereby requested to join me at the table up front: Mrs. Michelle Arminio, Mr. Ken Chiarella, Mrs. Patty Lang, and Mr. Paul Rutsky.
That's the wrong table.
Does everybody have their oath? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I
Paul Rutsky,
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support
the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Paul Rutsky, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of the member of Board of Education, and I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God. I, Paul Rutsky, do solemnly swear and declare that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, and I am not disqualified to hold this office due to a conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJSA 18A:12-1. So help me God.
Please sign your names.
Yeah. Yeah. Something tells me they won't be calling us in for the
For the concerts.
Yeah.
That's your first mistake, right?
That was good. Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Congratulations, and on behalf of the Board of Education, we would like to welcome you to the board and appreciate your service. I will now proceed with a roll call. Mrs. Arminio.
Here.
Mr. Braverman.
Here.
Mr. Chiarella.
Here.
Mrs. DeMayo.
Here.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Here.
Mrs. Lang.
Here.
Mrs. Carino.
Here.
Mr. Ryback.
Here.
Mr. Russo.
Here.
And Mr. Rutsky.
Here.
Let it be known that we have a quorum present this evening. We will now move to number 7 on the agenda, election of a board president. Would any members of the Board of Education like to nominate a member for president? Mr. Braverman, seeing your hand first.
I'd like to nominate Kathy Koloponowicz for president of the board.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I second.
Are there any other nominations for president of the Monroe Township Board of Education? Mr. Russo?
I would like to nominate Ken Chiarella.
I'll second that.
And I don't know if I have a minute to make a statement as to why I'm nominating, or should
Is it
Hold
open for
off.
discussion?
Let's establish who the candidates are
Okay.
first. Are there any other nominations for president? Seeing none, then we'll close the nomination process for president, and we can engage in some discussion if you wish, Mr. Russo.
I?
Use your microphone, please.
My reason for nominating Ken is due to the fact that he has a number of years already on the board. And being a newly elected board member, he will be on the board for the next 3 years. And I think one of the things that this board suffers from is lack of continuity in terms of the leadership. So if we go back a little, we've had Doug Poy was, I think, board president for 1 year, then wasn't reelected. Then we had Steve Ryback was president for 1 year, and now he's not reelected. Kathy is nominated tonight to be board president, but she also has 1 year left, and then she'll be up for reelection with, in a public election next fall. With Ken, we would be short of having a 3-year period where we could possibly have a board president that will take us through these difficult times. We're going to be going through some very challenging times. And I think it's good to have someone there who will be there for the 3 years. Now, he's also a graduate from Rutgers. He has many years' experience. I think that he got the most votes from the public in the history of Monroe Township for school board for 2016. He would be one of the board president if elected to have something that a board president hasn't had in quite a long time, kids in the school. So this might be a big plus. And yeah, the main thing is in the continuity. So I think it would be an excellent choice for the board to consider Ken for president.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Braverman?
Sure.
I really agree with you, Frank. It's very important this year that's coming up. We're going to have a building program, and a lot of things are happening. And that's why experience is very important. Ken has been here before. He knows what's going on, but Kathy has actually been involved in building schools, having referendums, and hiring superintendents. And I think that's very important. So as much as I like Ken on a personal note, and probably a professional note, I think Kathy is much better suited to be president at this time.
Mrs. Arminio.
Yes, I have some experience. Mr. Braverman talked about experience, but I had some experiences that I thought were not up to what a leader should be. And one of the things that struck me this will be my first term of my first year of my second term. However, the first year of my first term, when Kathy was the president, we had a negotiation year, and this year will be a negotiation year also. And to my disappointment, the members of the board were kept at bay during the negotiation process. Only the 3 negotiating members of the team were kept apprised of the actual negotiations. We kept being told, and when we asked what was going on, what would be the update, we were told that it was confidential and that they couldn't discuss it with the rest of the members of the board. And then the night of the memorandum of agreement, the board members who were not involved really in the negotiations at all and not brought up to date on a regular basis were given the memorandum in closed session. We were told we had to make a decision at that time in a very short period of time. I thought it was not appropriate for board members to be held in ignorance, essentially. And since then, since my 3 years, I have had extensive training with the New Jersey School Board Association that the good citizens of Monroe have paid for. I think the training has been exceptional. And what has happened is I have learned that indeed the board members are supposed to be on a regular basis informed about the process of the negotiation, and indeed that the full board is supposed to be, the full board that is not conflicted is supposed to be contributing to the outcome of the negotiations and being apprised of it. So that was disappointing to learn, and as I was a freshman board member, even though I spoke up, we were not encouraged to be informed. So I think that a leader, a president has to keep the full board informed, and we are all in this together. The president is not a unilateral decision maker. This is going to be a very extensive and hard fought referendum if we have to go out for it, and I think we should all be respected. We are all intellectually capable of understanding, and we certainly have a confidentiality pledge that we keep. So I think that is very essential. Another disappointing experience I had was that during Ms. Kalpanowitz's year that she ran for re-election, she used her position as a board member to go to events and took another non-board member but who was running, and in my opinion used her power to get reelected on school property. So again, unless Ms. Kalpanowitz would like to tell me that those things won't occur again and that they were just accidental, I have some concerns about the leadership. Thank you.
Any other comments? Otherwise, let's not get into a debate on any past events, but
Yeah, this is rather weird and strange because, I'm honored and I do appreciate you nominating me, Mr. Russo, and you seconding it, Ms. Arminio. But I'm not running for president, and the reason for that is that I feel that it might actually be detrimental to the students and the school system for me to become president at this point, only because I've been off the board for 2 years. I feel that I may be a little rusty myself. I haven't been as involved in the everyday affairs, the way all of you have. You get the confidentials and the emails, and you're aware of things, and you know things that I don't know, because I've been out of the loop for 2 years. So although I do appreciate it, and I'm very grateful and thankful for it, I would just rather, at this point, be able to be a good board member and get up to speed, as to what's going on and what I need to do to be a good board member without having the added burden of trying to lead and lead almost in darkness, because I'm not aware of some of the things that are happening.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll then engage a roll call, and
Can I, point of order, is Mr. Chiarella declining the nomination, or are we going to vote on his nomination?
there's a nomination on the floor. It's been seconded, so we will vote on it. And a vote for the candidate is a vote for that candidate for president of the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Simple majority of the members of the quorum will prevail. So we will begin with the first nomination being Kathy Koloponowicz, and we'll have a roll call. A yes is a vote for Kathy Koloponowicz as president. Mrs. Arminio.
No.
Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Chiarella.
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mrs. Lang.
Yes.
Mrs. Carino.
No.
Mr. Ryback. No. And Mr. Russo. No. That's 5 yeas. The Jamesburg member is not eligible to vote on the officer position. Next candidate, number 2, is Mr. Chiarella. Again, a yes vote is for the president of the Board of Education. Mrs. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman. No. Mr. Chiarella.
No.
Mrs. DeMayo.
No.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
No.
Mrs. Lang.
No.
Mrs. Carino.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Russo.
Yes.
That's 4 yeas for Mr. Chiarella and 5 yeas for Mrs. Koloponowicz. Mrs. Koloponowicz has just been resolved to be the next president of the Monroe Township Board of Education. Congratulations. As such, Mrs. Koloponowicz will now chair the rest of the meeting. And next on the agenda will be the nomination of Board Vice President.
Thank you.
Nomination process.
I want to say something first. Well, for those of you who supported my nomination, I appreciate the support. For those of you who didn't, I respect your decision, but I've never seen a board president election like today, and I hope to never see one again like this. We are supposed to be a board that's united for students and staff, and today we've shown that we're not united and that some of us are really here for the wrong reasons and to bash other people. I don't think that was appropriate, and I hope it doesn't happen again to the next board president. And then I would like to just tell you that no matter what has happened in the past, I have always been ethical, I've always been moral, I've always been honest, I've always followed the protocol, I've followed the decisions that have been made. So for those people in the public who think I didn't, I did. So I'd just like to thank Mr. Ryback for his past year on the board. I know that it takes up a lot of your time, and it's not an easy position to be in. And then I'd like to congratulate Michelle on her reelection to the board. It's great to have you back. Mr. Chiarella, you're bringing back experience and dedication, and we're welcoming you back to the board. You're going to be a big help. And Mrs. Lang, you've won your first board election, and we welcome you to the Board of Education. So we have an awful lot to accomplish this year. We have a referendum that we need to get out. We also have negotiations, and we're not going to be able to accomplish anything unless we work together. So at this time, we will go to number 8 on the agenda. I will open up the floor for the nominations for vice president. Are there any, Ms. DeMayo?
I nominate Marvin Braverman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Chiarella. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Russo?
Steve Ryback.
Mr. Ryback? Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second that.
Is there any other nominations for Vice President of the Board of Education? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion and a second to close nominations.
I motion to close the nomination process.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, at this time, we'll have a roll call for Vice President of the Board of Education.
Yes, ma'am. The first nominee is Marvin Braverman for Board Vice President. Again, a yes vote would be for the person to be Vice President of the Board of Education. Mrs. Arminio.
No.
Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Chiarella.
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mrs. Lang.
Yes.
Mrs. Carino.
No.
Mr. Ryback.
No.
And Mr. Russo. That's 5 yeas. Second candidate is Steve Ryback. Mrs. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman. Mr. Chiarella.
No.
Mrs. DeMayo.
No.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
No.
Mrs. Lang.
No.
Mrs. Carino.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
And Mr. Russo.
Yes.
That would be 4 yeas for Mr. Ryback, 5 yeas for Mr. Braverman. Mr. Braverman has been elected Board Vice President. Congratulations, sir.
Congratulations, Mr. Braverman. Would you like to say something, or would you like to?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we move on to the Code of Ethics. And everybody received with their packet a Code of Ethics, I think it was like 9 sheets of paper. Excuse me?
When did we get a packet?
In the beginning, December 20th or something? So there is an acknowledgement page that everybody needs to acknowledge that they received it, they've read it, and then we need to return it back to the, either Mr. Gorski or Nancy. I have,
Steve needs one.
I have copies, I have extra copies.
Need a few, Mike.
Sorry, Mike.
yeah, well, I think mine is too.
Okay. Sorry, I know I spent.
Okay. So we'll be giving out a copy of the acknowledged form to everybody. We could sign it and then give it back to Mike or Nancy this evening. So while Mr. Gorski's doing that, we'll go to number 10 on the agenda, the suspension of policy by law. It is recommended that the Board of Education suspend the operation of policy bylaw 0164 to permit the board to conduct only one public forum at this evening's public meeting. We need a motion and a second. Who was first?
Can't second it until somebody first. Oh, I'll motion. If I'm allowed.
Yeah, because I didn't think I did. Mr. Rutsky and Mr. Ryback. This, we don't need
Beg
a
your
roll
pardon, was
call.
that number 10?
It was, yes.
And who was,
Mr. Rutsky, Mr. Ryback.
thank you.
We don't need a roll call on this, do we?
Just all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Then for this meeting only, we're going to have one public forum.
And anything goes on this one.
I got that written down. and we will be able to come up to the mic and talk about anything, either on the agenda or off the agenda, school-related. And I just wanted to say that public forum is supposed to be the opportunity for members of the public to make comment on any school-related issue that you feel is important or a concern to the community. It has been in the past more of a question and answer session, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to come up and you're supposed to give the board your opinions on certain subjects. So I've been to a lot of training, a lot of board workshops, and we're probably the only school district, maybe in New Jersey, that does this. So I'm going to request that we send the policy back to the policy committee and review it, just so that we make sure that we're going to be fair to the whole public. So for tonight, I'm just going to ask you to come up to the microphone. If you have comments, make your comments. If you have any questions after your comments, we'll try to answer them as best we can. So anyone wishing to speak about anything, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. All comments will be made to the chair, and we will adhere to our 3-minute allotted time.
Good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. I thought somebody needs to come up and say something before the other people come up, so I thought I would lead the way. But most importantly, I'm extremely...
I'm sorry, name and address for the record, please.
Oh, my name and address? The guy who ran for school board and lost. That would be Andy Peluri, 16 St. James Street. But it's very refreshing to see, Kathy, that you be elected as the president, and we wish you, on behalf of some of the community that supported me when I ran for the election, that you're sitting up there, and we're here to help in any which way possible to get better education to the township. So thank you very much for volunteering to take the position. And I also thank Mr. Baverman. I have seen him in action at the facilities meeting, and he's a man of few words, but a deep thinker, and I really hope that he continues on the board and brings that kind of thoughtfulness to make sure that we put into action, not just words. So thank you very much for that. Ken, welcome to the board. Looking forward to working with you, and same thing with Patty. Congratulations to both of you. And I'm ready and willing to do anything that you guys want us to do moving forward. So I want to offer my expertise and my services. Thank you very much, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Pelori.
Corinne Masters, 9 Michaela Court. I just want to congratulate Kathy and Marv for this evening, and a couple of things. One is you guys really need to kind of get your act together and work together as a group. There is a lot going on in this district, so you need to work as a group. It's kind of sad what has gone on here this evening, so as a parent, it's kind of disappointing. Secondly, I think my question is more for Dr. Alvich. So my son in the middle school, just his Spanish teacher officially started this week, his second one from a sub that he's had. I'd like to know if they're going to be getting actual grades for this cycle or just pass-fail again as first market grade, because he hasn't had a grade in his grade book since September 30th.
Ms. Albert? Dr. Albert?
When you hired me, I was Miss Albert. I don't know the answer to that, so I will have to get back to you. But I will check with Dr. Roselle, who's the supervisor for world language, and I will get back to you.
Okay, and do we know, okay, and can also, when you find out, I also need to, like, because now at this point, they missed October, November, December. It's 3 months of Spanish. They're going to expect him to take Spanish 2 next year. He's going to be 3 months behind every other 7th grader taking Spanish again, who didn't have this teacher. So I don't know what the protocol is going to be to try to get those kids, to catch up, because it's not fair for him to try to now do a quarter of the work, in less time. So, okay.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Hello everyone, Happy New Year. Ram Rangnath, 6 Owens Drive. Again, congratulations to all the new members and the new president and the vice president. Just I guess comments. I was not surprised, and I appreciate what Ms. Jill DeMaio did. Armenio, sorry, Miss.
Okay.
Apologize. Ms. Michelle Arminio did in raising that. I think that's how democracy is supposed to work. People should be sharing opinions, prior experiences, and so I actually applaud what she did. So I'm not disappointed with how this went off. I think that shows that this is a forum that will have healthy debates and dialogues. That's how you get to the best outcomes. With Mr. Ken Chirella, one of the people who voted for him in these elections, I was a little bit disappointed because sometimes, you have to take it, a leadership role when you're given. I've done that in my career. Sometimes you don't have all the time to prepare for it, but with your past experience and given that you've been given, you should have actually taken that up. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but congratulations, and I hope for a good set of outcomes. And last point, from the president that I heard, maybe I mistakenly heard this, that the public forum is just meant for opinions, not for Q&A. Maybe I misheard it.
No,
Can you clarify?
that is what a public forum is supposed to be, and going through board training and everything. We are the only district that I know of that does a Q&A.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate if that is a privilege that we are getting. I hope we can retain that privilege. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else from the public?
At least I get to say, congratulations, Madam
Give your
President.
name and
My name
address.
is John Elbis on 8 Belmont Court in Monroe Township, New Jersey. So congratulations to those that were elected to the board, and to you, Madam President, for your position, and to Mr. Braverman for his position. I also want to echo that dissent can be constructive, and I applaud Ms. Arminio on her efforts to bring forth an approach that I think is transparent, it's refreshing, it's meant to hopefully be in the spirit of how this board operates for the remainder of this very critical year. For me, my question and just really my mandate to the board is transparency around this upcoming referendum that will affect many of us in the community. Understanding that roadmap for this calendar year, I think, is of the utmost importance for many of us, however it shapes out. There already is some language in today's agenda that speaks to a continuation of the building process. So all I ask at this meeting for this newly seated board is to hopefully live up to the mandate of transparency to the community, to give us a roadmap of things to come, and not just on a piecemeal month-by-month basis just before the board is to meet, but to give us a trajectory so that we can react to the changes, so that we can potentially assist with those changes. I think that's essentially what many of us are looking for. So again, I appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Doug, excuse me, Doug Boy, 4 Tamarack Road. You have to excuse my voice. There's something going on with it. I do congratulate the newly elected president and vice president, as well as the new board members, Patty Lang, and Ken Chiarella. And I do wish all the success that this board can find during this coming year. You do have some tremendous challenges facing you. But more specifically, I was a little puzzled, and you are dealing with this under the pre-referendum planning, a little puzzled when the second paragraph, even though I know this has been mentioned in prior board meetings, where we're going to be seeking appraisals of properties that are located in municipalities other than Monroe Township. And that's in terms of building referendum sites. My comment is I seriously doubt that the residents of Monroe Township would support building a school for our children, which is not within the township itself. So that's my comment, and if someone cares to shed some light on why we would be looking at properties outside of the township for the public's understanding of that, then I think it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poi. I'll let Mr. Gorski answer that.
Good evening, Mr. Poi. Rest assured, at the current time, the Board of Education is not looking at any properties outside of Monroe Township. That resolution is consistent with the statute which authorizes such, but there are no immediate parcels outside of the township that are being pursued. As an update, there is a piece of land in town that we talked about vaguely at the last Building Grounds Transportation Committee meeting, where there has been an expressed interest of sale by the owner, and the parcel has a lot of facets meeting the board's needs. So we are looking at that, and we are still following the resolution that's in place, which is exploring the 65-acre piece of property as well. We're also engaged with a land broker who is seeking properties in addition to Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvick, Mr. Tague, and I, who have been driving around town and knocking on farmers' doors and exploring any parcel of land that would be suitable for the construction of a school. And I can tell you with a great sense of optimism that we believe we found one that seems very attractive at this time, and we're aggressively pursuing it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Okay, then at this time we will close public forum, and we will go to number 12 on the agenda, some organizational items. A, meeting dates. Be it resolved that the regular meetings of the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe shall be held as per the previously submitted schedule, at which time formal action may be taken. We need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Mr. Ryback, Ms.
Second.
Arminio? Is this in all in favor? We could do.
Let's do an all in favor on that.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
On 12D, the newspapers. It says, be it resolved that the Board of Education designates the Cranberry Press or the Home News Tribune. However, I did notice that when we do publicize it, we do in both. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's a good pickup, Mrs. Arminio. The law requires that you have a multitude of different announcements that have to go in the registered official newspaper. Board of Education has always had two. In the event that there's some kind of transmission error or printing error and it doesn't get printed, we're still able to proceed with business.
Okay, so essentially, the law only requires one, but we're going with two?
Yes, ma'am.
Which I would highly recommend, and I know the governor is trying to get the, or pass, well, failed legislation, I think, in the House, in the Assembly, that was trying to prevent or the newspapers from being the official carriers or one of the official carriers of public notices. I, for one, believe that there are still people who read the newspapers, and I would hope that we would be consistent with that and still publicize them both. Again, very often people see something in a newspaper that they wouldn't go online necessarily to see. So I would ask that we all still agree to that. Thank you.
We could do it all as one consent roll call, A through D.
Oh, okay. So A, meeting dates. B, policy. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe that all policies of the previous board are hereby adopted until such time as the board decides to revise or otherwise alter policies. C, designation of banks or depositories. Be it resolved that the Board of Education designates the following banks or depositories for school district funds: the Depository Trust Company, State of New Jersey Cash Management Fund, Provident Bank, which provides most of the banking services, and U.S. Bank. Be it further resolved that the business administrator is authorized to establish accounts and wire transfer funds among the accounts as needed and approve the payments of bills between board meetings. And D, newspapers for legal advertisements. Be it resolved that the Board of Education designates the Cranberry Press and or the Home News Tribune, both of which circulate in the school district as official newspapers for the legal advertisement. And I think we already have a Mr. Ryback and Ms. Arminio. So is there any comments or questions other than Ms. Arminio's? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call.
Mrs. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman. Yes. Mr. Chiarella.
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mrs. Poloponowicz.
Yes.
Mrs. Lang.
Yes.
Mrs. Carino.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback?
Yes.
Mr. Russo? And Mr. Rutsky?
Yes.
Madam Board President, motion passes.
Thank you. And we'll go to our student board members report.
Okay. So, just a few days before winter break started, the Science National Honor Society had its first STEM alumni panel where they had students who have graduated from the high school in the past few years come back and talk about their experiences after graduation and just what it's been like to pursue STEM careers in college and past college for some of them, I think. It was a really good experience, and I hope they do continue it again because I think everybody walked away learning something new. And then for two things that are coming up later this week, tomorrow the school's DECA chapter is going on their trip. I think it's to Keene University, but I'm not completely sure. And then this Friday through Sunday is the Model UN conference. So our school is sending, I think, 60 students to that trip, and they've been preparing for it for a few weeks now. And basically what they're going to do is simulate a UN session about different topics depending on what committees they've been placed into, and they'll be returning on Sunday from that. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there any questions for our student board member? Okay, then we will go to the business administrator's report. Mr. Gorski?
Thank you. Madam Board President and members of the Monroe Township Board of Education, it is recommended that board action items A be approved by consent roll call. And I apologize for the revised agenda. Administration, Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvick, and I instituted a purchase order freeze this week where we projected that we are going to free up approximately $1 million in this year's budget from non-essential spending, which the philosophy has always been if it hasn't been spent and ordered now in the school calendar process, that it's probably not essential. This is not pertaining to any contractual obligations, but we wish to transfer that $1 million into capital reserve where we have a balance of $975,000 currently. That would give the board approximately $2 million to use to negotiate the procurement of land or to use it as an installment on the bond referendum process. So essentially that amount of monies would be used from savings from the budget in lieu of borrowing from the sale of municipal bonds over a 30-year period at a much higher expense to the taxpayers. It was not permitted and authorized by the county office yet. The window for that will open up during the month of June, even though we have had permission in the past other than the month of June. And this certainly had a good need and a reason, rationale for that, but in any event, it was denied. We are seeking other alternative financing means, and the Board of Education will be apprised of that as this comes more into view. So right now, we only have one agenda item, and it is for appraisals on the property that I referred to before, and any other properties that may come to our attention so that we could act expeditiously on any prospects. It also authorizes the use of environmental services and the board's architect of record and an environmental group, the engineering group to determine the feasibility of these prospective sites for the hosting of a school building. The costs for such services will be aggressively monitored by the business office and the administration so that they're reasonable and consistent with the purpose, and we will report everything to the board for full transparency and disclosure. So before you is board action items A. It needs a motion and a second.
Second.
Mr. Ryback and Mrs. DeMayo.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Chiarella?
I have a few comments and maybe some questions also. This seems to me to be kind of open-ended. With I'm not used to seeing an agreement like this where it's so open-ended, where you have someone being hired in this case, one of which is an engineer, to do site work or plans or make plans and look at things, and it kind of can go on forever, it seems to me. As long as we wanted it to go on, it would be open-ended, and I think that an agreement that we'd have would have to be more, would have to be, I would like to see it be more limiting anyway. The other thing is, I think that the one thing that's missing that I would like to see here is that we have an engineer draw up plans to use the property that we currently own. So we have a number of parcels that we own. We have schools that we could add on to. We have a lot of ways that we could save money for the taxpayers while still alleviating the crowding and doing the things that we need to do to get space for our kids. And this, I think, is giving us more of an opportunity just to buy more land and look at land and do things like that when I think we really do have the ability to build on what we have, but we're not even drawing out plans to look at that, which would really be where the cost savings are. We go out and we look for land, we buy land, or we spend $20,000 or $30,000 more than we've already spent, to look at this other land now and go through the process, and then decide that that might not be right or the price might be too high, and then finally, I think what we're going to end up doing is getting around to either saying, okay, we're going to accept the original deal with Toll Brothers, or we're going to say, all right, let's see if we could build on the land that we already have, and at what cost to the taxpayers. So that's number one. The other thing is that I think we also have to look at what we're going to do in the short term. So I know that that's not part of what A is tonight, but we have to look at what we're going to do in the short term to alleviate the overcrowding. And I think that as much as we don't want to talk about it or look at it, trailers are going to be a necessity, and they're going to be a necessity rather soon. So the last thing that I have with regards to this is that I know we don't need an RFP for this, but I think at this point it might be nice to have, because an open-ended contract with rates and things like that can kind of go on forever. If we limited it more, maybe we could get bids, and we could find companies who would be willing to do this, and it might be this company, but who might be willing to do this at a cost for us that is less than what this is. That's just my opinion.
Madam?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chiarelli. I appreciate those comments. I'd just like to address a few of them as they come into the business function. All of the professionals here, without the authority of the appraisal on the property, have been previously approved as professionals of record, architect of record, engineer of record, with this same rate schedule. There was some concern about whether the board or administration can use those professionals beyond the broker of record to go into areas such as evaluating a parcel of land to see if it's feasible for school construction. So out of an effort to be more transparent than maybe need be, we put it on the agenda again, so it's just fully disclosed to the board members and the public how we are using these professionals and what we are paying for them. As I mentioned, this will be aggressively monitored by management here, and this is money well spent, in my opinion, because, God forbid, a mistake is made and a property is misevaluated in the early stages. It could waste time and expense, and this will clearly give us a professional's opinion as to whether we should proceed or not. And I mentioned the word professional with emphasis because these folks, architect of record, engineer of record, have licenses issued by the state, and they're exempt from the bidding process under the professional appointment exemption. We still do our due diligence in the business office and do competitive quoting, and at roundtable meetings in the county, we collect information on attorney rates and engineer rates to make sure that anything that we recommend to the board is consistent with the best practices. And Mr. Tague, Dr. Alvick, Dr. Kozak, and I believe that these all before you on this resolution tonight are. We are also simultaneously, and I failed to mention this before, working with the architect aggressively for additions to existing facilities, as well as the exploration of existing land that is in the district's portfolio. Unfortunately, a lot of the land that's in our portfolio is either wet or not large enough to host a school, and we've looked aggressively at that first. That would be the prudent thing to do before going out and seeking other land. Trailers. Before we began the budget philosophy process this year, Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvick, and I met with all of the principals to address enrollment in their schools. We provided them with projections of enrollment for next year. We went over the number of class settings in each school, class sessions, And all of the principals have felt and expressed to us, as the leaders of their buildings individually, that there was no need for trailers in the 17-18 budget. However, there is a strong anticipation that that will not last into 18-19, and we are planning for that already because the trailer lease payments must be included within the cap. And being that we are close to cap or will be at cap, if you add a couple $100,000 of trailer payments, that's going to be in lieu of programs and services already offered. So something's going to have to be eliminated to add these trailer costs and lease payments. And I can also say with knowledge that the architect of record, the engineer of record, all were previously engaged and retained through an RFP process. Brinkenhoff Environmental Services, Mr. Tague and I recently did an RFP for that. And Edwards Engineering was a recent RFP when we did Oak Tree School, and we have a very favorable history and rating with that vendor. So thank you.
Dr. Kozak would like to add to that?
Yeah, I would. Mr. Gorski, you mentioned a lot of valuable points there. You didn't leave me many other things to mention, but still, although good points. There's been a lot of things that we've been involved in, as Mr. Gorski has stated. And one of the things that Mr. Gorski did not mention is the 65 acres that the township has offered to us. And I know it has to go through Toll Brothers and all of that. Even if that land doesn't prove to be suitable at this time, our report from the demographer on a 20 to 25-year basis shows that the growth will continue in this township. We can't go out for a referendum on a prediction beyond 5 or even 10 years. But we did mention that, we've brought it up to the board at different times, that the projection is that there will be continued growth. So that land, if not usable at this time, it would be very valuable for us, for the school district, to be able to hold on to that land for future use. It seems that a lot of the growth is in the southern part of town, and some of the future developments that haven't even begun yet are down in that area. So that was part of the thought, that it wouldn't be money wasted, that we would look at it and see if that land was viable, and if so, what could we do to hold on to that? The other piece of land that Mr. Gorski referred to, we're looking at that, and as Mr. Gorski also said, our existing buildings, I think Applegarth is probably the notable building. We've looked at that several different ways for what we could do, including if we had to do something if we built behind it would be one situation. We might not have enough room to do that. So if we had to level that building, we would have to move the students, and then that would look, we'd have to look at trailers to house students in the meantime. So they're all things that are under consideration. As I think you're very well aware, we started with the Student Growth Advisory Committee a year ago, and we've explored so many different options, and we're continually looking until we feel like we're close to having some finality, at least for this coming year, to what we need to do. We really feel that we're very close. But until we're there, we want to make sure that we explore everything, and we want to look at both short-term and long-term goals. Thank you.
Ms. Arminio?
Yes. Well, first of all, I would just like to sort of point out that customarily and traditionally on a reorganization meeting, substantive resolutions like this are really not brought forward. And I understand the urgency of things, and I was hoping that perhaps we could have gotten a special meeting to discuss this in particular before the January 25th meeting, so within the next week or so. And I know that the public has clamored for a specific meeting just to discuss these kinds of things. So I was wondering if the board president would consider, and I'm asking you to table this and call for a special meeting to discuss this resolution. And I know there's a sense of urgency, but I think if we postpone it for just 1 week and then put this all on the table and invite the public specifically for this so they understand what's going on, that would be my thought. And again, because people might not come out for reorganization meetings because they're generally housekeeping and just customarily not substantive.
Mr. Gorski?
Thank you, Mrs. Arminio. You know, at the last Building Grounds Transportation Committee meeting, there was a clear message sent to administration that there is an immediate sense of urgency with this building project, with emphasis. And as such, and as I mentioned before, we've identified one very attractive piece of property in town that we would like to move on. We have an acknowledgement from the owner that they would like to sell and enter into negotiations. We had an invitation to do an appraisal on the property and an invitation to use our professionals to evaluate the property for its suitability for a school. These are all very time-sensitive issues, and being that we don't have a committee in place yet because they've all been disbanded, and because I think I gave the proper due diligence to this with communications to the board members to make an informed vote on the matter, we really need the latitude to move ahead with the exploration of this and perhaps other pieces of land and other opportunities that may become available. A special board meeting at this time, in my opinion, and as I mentioned in the email to you earlier, would not necessarily be warranted because it would just be asking the board in a public session, can administration have permission to go ahead and do an appraisal on the property and use professionals at a reasonable amount of funds to determine if it's suitable to explore for a school building process? It is not at all entering into negotiations for the price of it. It is not at all committing funds for the purchase of it. It is simply part of the initial exploration process.
Okay, you also mentioned that it was the board president's decision, so I'm asking board president.
Any board member can make a motion to do anything. If you want to make a motion to table it, you can table it. You can do that.
Okay. Yes, I would like to make a motion to table this and call for we'll table this and call for a special meeting within the next week or so.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Chiarella. Is there any comments? Mr. Chiarella.
It's okay.
Mr. Chiarella. Any comments, questions, discussion?
Madam, as it's a priority motion, there's no discussion on that. It just goes right to a roll call to table.
Oh, sure.
Mrs. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman.
No.
Mr. Chiarella.
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo.
No.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
No.
Mrs. Lang.
No.
Mrs. Carino.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback.
No.
Mr. Russo. Mr. Rutsky.
No.
Motion to table has not passed. The Business Administrator's Board Action Item A is back on the floor.
Can I make another comment?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Since it's not passing, I would like to just comment on the first paragraph that the recommendation to authorize appraisal services obtained will, my objection to this is that appraisal services don't really give us any indication, unless they're different here, generally do not give any indication of whether the land is suitable for engineering issues or anything. Most appraisal services say that they don't do any hazardous, they don't do any impact studies, they don't know if there's any hazardous things on the land. So the appraisal is just going to give you a valuation. But to me, we don't seem to have an option to purchase any of these things. Just to do an appraisal seems to me to not be necessary. I think the other parts of I would agree to the other parts of the resolution, but to go out and do appraisals on properties, I really don't see the value of that. So I'd like that explained as to why that is a necessity. I mean, after we have an intent to purchase or an option to buy, if we move forward after we do engineering studies, that's one thing. But to just have an appraisal on a property is just giving the homeowner, without any agreement from them or any responsibility on their part to us. To me, I don't see that as in the best interest of the district to spend that money in particular.
Ms. Gorski?
I requested some quotes for appraisals, and the fees came in the $4,000 to, I believe, the $5,500 range, well under the quote threshold, where the board has considered that material or not to take to committee. That's been the precedent with that kind of spending latitude in the past. So if I was to follow that, I wouldn't even need that as part of the resolution. I could just engage in an appraisal service because of the immaterial cost. I beg to disagree with you with the appreciation of the value assessment at this time, because I think when you're contemplating different pieces of property as we are, a value is an essential part of the deliberation, and I believe that the public and the board certainly would be interested in knowing how much is that piece of land going to cost before we engage professionals to commit funds to determine its feasibility and explore it further. If it's out of our price range, it's best to know that up front.
Well, first of all, I don't think the Open Public Meetings Act does say that negotiations for land would be done in closed session, so the public wouldn't know about that unless we were negotiating specifically for a piece of land. And I don't think it's prudent, again, to do an appraisal on a property because that's all you're going to get is a land evaluation. If the property is very well suited to a school, I think we're going to move ahead on that basis, because we do have a future need and we do have to put more land into our portfolio. So, like I said, doing an evaluation based on the environmental aspects, on the engineering aspects, that makes sense to me. But I think just because the business administration or the administration is able to spend the money, I don't think it's necessarily prudent if there's nothing we gain by that until the land is determined suitable for building.
Just a point of clarification, this is not entering into a negotiation. This is simply appraising the value of the property so that we have the general parameters of how much it costs, because that will be an integral part of this as it progresses, if it should progress. And for the cost associated with it, it's going to have to be determined at some time. And it's good information and money well spent to the board, in my opinion.
Am I right that in my understanding, oh, sorry, no, she has it. Am I right in my understanding?
Jill, could you give her the microphone?
Sorry, Jill. Thanks. Am I right in my understanding that the property that you knocked on doors and located, it's not for sale, so they don't have a price for that, or the homeowners, they don't have a value for the let. So we need to have the information. Am I right in understanding that we need to have that information so that we can become educated consumers into participating in the purchase of the property?
Madam, that is absolutely correct. Mr. Tague and I identified this property initially from Google Maps. And we looked at pieces of land throughout this entire township. And this was one that was in a very good location. And we approached the owner and asked them if they would be interested in exploring a sale with the Board of Ed, performing an appraisal at our expense, and at our expense also, using our engineers to determine if it's suitable for our needs. The person was interested, so to your point, we had no basis, no estimate of value at all into this property. And whether I buy a piece of equipment here at the district, like a snow plow truck, I certainly want to know the value of it before I would ever do a purchase order.
Mr. Ryback?
And by the way, I could never do a purchase order for a piece of land. I just want to be clear on that. That would require a board resolution.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Gorski. Certainly, I'm not a realtor, but Ms. Arminio's questioning brought a question to my mind. If we are going to go and have an appraisal done on a piece of property, implicit in that appraisal, isn't it whether it's suitable for building or not? I mean, if it's a very low appraisal, I think maybe there's something wrong. If it's very high, it might say that, well, it's very pristine or something. I mean, I would think that there's some kind of implied meaning in there as to the buildability of a piece of property in an appraisal.
Madam, And I don't.
I'm wrong. I
I don't mean to, be facetious, but if I was putting up a colonial on a 1 acre lot, certainly I might be able to come to that conclusion. But when you're talking about a school facility the size of potentially a middle school, and you're dealing with the complexities of the Department of Education with testing of land and soil samples and a plethora of tests on the land before it's ever determined suitable for a school, the wetland study, the feasibility study that also involves the demographer to make sure that the square footage of the proposed facility can house the projected number of unhoused students that we have. It truly goes beyond the sophistication of administration at that point, and we would need the professionals, and it would go beyond just an appraisal value of the property.
I'm certainly aware of that. I just meant as to get a feeling for the worth of the property for future building. Would the appraisal give us some indication of that? Certainly not an exact one, of course not. But
the appraisal would give you the approximate appraised value of the property, and that would be a starting point for negotiations at some point. But before that, it would be a tool for the Board of Education to determine if this fits into your proposed project size and cost. Because we have discussed at the committee level and an administrative level the cost parameters of what we feel we can engage into for a successful referendum. Land is certainly a component of that.
And the more information we have as a board on everything that we have on every piece of property, the better decision we're going to be able to make for the public. So I think it's important to have all this information. Ms. DeMeo?
So the process, you've bought land before, right?
Since I've been the business administrator, I have not procured land because Oak Tree was not procured. It was a transfer donation, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
And the high school was a non-procured piece of property. Also, it was traded for other space in the Green Acres exchange.
So I guess my question is then, is there a statute that requires what must be done first when you are buying land?
We talked today with our bond counsel, our board attorney, about the procurement of land, about all available statutory means to procure land financially. And we also have done research into the Department of Education approval process for land as part of a referendum. And certainly the environmental, the engineer would be required. I do not believe that an appraisal of the property would be required by the Department of Education. They could, because they're authorizing borrowing on that, so they may want to know that along the way. I don't have specific knowledge about that. But again, it's an essential tool, in my opinion, to the Board of Ed as part of the deliberative process of choosing, should we pursue this land? Are there better options on the table?
If I could, Mr. Mayo. Like Mr. Gorski said, we were looking at a lot of different, with Mary Smith, and looking at statutes and the law, and we reached out to the county office and the state and various other offices. And I can't say with certainty, so I would have to check, but I'm pretty sure that an appraisal was indicated in statute that would have to occur. Now, the timeline of it, to be honest with you, I really can't answer that. But I'm almost positive when we were looking at 6A and looking at all the different things that we had, that an appraisal was mentioned in there.
Thank you.
Madam, to that point, the Board of Education did procure an appraisal on Oak Tree, and that land was not purchased. It was transferred or donated. So I believe Dr. Kozak is correct. There is probably a requirement that you get an appraisal at some point in the process.
Ms. Arminio?
Yeah, I'm not objecting to the appraisal per se. I'm objecting to the timing of the appraisal. If we don't have any concession or option or agreement from a landowner, to me, just getting the appraisal is a waste of the money before we do a construction or an engineering thing. If we have permission from the owner to either to have an option or a first right to purchase the property, if all of our other contingencies are met, I don't have a problem with that. But to just go out to different land parcels and say we're going to do appraisals, 5,000 here, 2,500 here, it's not a lot of money, and you certainly can do it without our permission, apparently, but I don't think it's prudent to do it unless we have some kind of agreement, not even a guarantee, some kind of an agreement with the landowner that if we choose to proceed after the appraisal, that we have an option to do so. If we get an appraisal and the landowner goes, holy mackerel, that's twice as much as I thought I was going to get. So maybe I'll just put it on the open market, or maybe, I'll just use this as a base and I'll try to get other buyers. I want to protect the district and try to do it. Again, I have no objection to the appraisal. I have no objection to the engineering. I have an objection to the timing of why the appraisal is necessary if we don't have any kind of agreement or understanding or intent from a landowner. It's just tweaking the language would satisfy.
And I guess conversely, it could be that the landowner feels that the property is worth much more than what the appraisal would tell us,
Right.
too, so.
But neither is important unless it works for us. Until the land is feasible for building and construction and it is clean of any hazardous substances or toxins or anything like that, to me, the value of it is really not quite material yet. But that, I will be satisfied with whatever the vote is.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah,
Mr.
I do.
Chiavelli?
Mr. Gorski, did you say that there was already a study done on the existing land and we could not build on the existing land for whatever reason? Wetlands, things like that?
I beg your pardon?
Because there was wetlands designations and things like that, is that what you said?
Yes, we've worked extensively with our architect on exploring the portfolio of land that the district owns. We have different pieces all over. We have a piece in back of Mill Lake. We have a piece in back of Oak Tree. There's a piece associated with the Applegarth property. There's a piece associated with the middle school. That one in particular is very wet. That's been brought up here and talked about before. There was a previous exploration of that property and it was abandoned because of the wetlands there. Either the pieces are too small or they're wet, but all of our inventory that we've discussed with our architect has been not suitable to recommend to explore for construction of a school.
With that being said, though, I mean, Applegarth is still, there's areas there. There are areas that are, I believe there are some areas back there that are wet, but that land would still be usable. And Brookside, I believe, we could add on to Brookside. I think we've mentioned that before. But Mill Lake and, well, we didn't really look, Woodland's kind of closed in. We don't really have the growth there. But it was definitely Mill Lake. And I think, I believe the EPA was involved as well. Some of the information came from them of some of the existing information that they take from satellite shots that show which areas are wet.
Yes.
Whereas that's true, what we're looking for here is we are going to be very underserved with an addition to a building when we're looking at up to 2,500 unhoused students in the next 5 years. We have 1,000 now, we're projected to have another 15. We need something of the magnitude of a new middle school and/or a new elementary school and/or in addition to the high school in order to satisfy our responsibility to house the number of students. And in addition to Applegarth, without a complete tear down of the building, it appears would be unsatisfactory in that regard. So yes, we certainly went through our inventory first, but we did not find anything satisfactory to that magnitude.
Mr. Russo?
So, regarding the land, I think it was 2 meetings ago, I suggested posting something on the website that the district was interested in land, and I guess that wasn't done. But now I see that you hired professional land company, search company. Is that right?
Madam? Yes, we've utilized the services of realtors with land expertise. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, there is no expense to the board for those services as the commission comes from the seller.
But you also now have a number of administrators, yourself included, looking for land. So you guys are working, doing the job that they would be doing, or should be doing.
very aggressively. It's all hands on deck right now to try to solve our.
And how many administrators do you have looking for land? Plain realtor or?
I would say certainly Mr. Tague has been the front runner of that, Dr. Alvick, Dr. Kozak, and myself.
Okay, so it's keeping you guys quite busy. Then who would be doing what you guys are supposed to be doing?
Well, we're not out running around all the time. I mean, if there was something of interest, there was maybe twice that I got in a car and drove out to get a visual, because it helps. You know, I looked at Google Maps, I looked at the visuals, but it's not every single day. I mean, there's plenty of other things that are keeping us busy with that.
Okay,
Besides that.
the land search company, when they find land, do they do an appraisal? Is like we want to do?
No, not automatically, no.
So why would we do the appraisal?
Because we have one very attractive parcel of land that's going to be number one on the agenda of BG&T as soon as that committee reconvenes. It suits all of our needs. It has many facets that are very attractive to the Board of Ed, unlike other properties that we've explored. It's in a reasonable price range for the referendum scope project that we were talking about. And we would like to know that information because absent that, I'm certain that would come up at committee, I'm certain that would come up at the board meeting, and for a $4,000 to $5,000 expense, it's money well spent that would be part of this requirement anyway.
It seems like the professional company is not coming through with anything, and you guys are being more proactive and really trying to do the job that you hired not hired through payment, but hired to do.
You know, I bought a house through a realtor in the past, and they certainly did not do an appraisal on the property. I had to as the buyer, and I had to do so for the mortgage company. We would have to do so for the Department of Education. It would not be the obligation of the realtor or the land broker to do an appraisal.
And would it be possible to look at any of the inventory in the town's open space? Since taxpayers already own that land, it's fully paid for? Has it been done before?
Has it been done before with open space?
Yeah, this was open
The answer to that is yes, but that is a very difficult process that the board has not indicated they want to go into. In fact, I've heard to the contrary.
Very time-consuming.
Okay, well, we did it here, so we know the
We did
pathway
hear
to
there
do
was
it.
several years of litigation that followed. It was a very difficult road.
And what about looking at, and this is just another, current space we have in the school? Have there been any professional companies that look at the way work is done and how space can be utilized more efficiently?
Madam? Yes. That has been also looked at. Not only are we looking for the main pieces of the puzzle, which would be a parcel of land enough for a middle school, elementary school, as I mentioned before, but we're looking at additions to our existing facilities. We're also looking at more efficient use of space. I shouldn't say more efficient because, let's take this media center, for example. I believe this space is being used efficiently, and certainly Mr. Goodall would testify to that. But in an emergency situation where you have unhoused students, you would consider perhaps using a media center and converting it to classrooms on a temporary basis. So, yes, we have explored every option.
Really. 2 summers ago, the middle school, we converted several spaces within the middle school to extra classroom space. This year, in this building, the room back there has been converted. So we've looked at every available space that we have. We've worked the redistricting that occurred a couple years ago really helped with the elementary schools. With the class sizes, we're keeping a very close watch on the elementary class sizes. We're exploring things to do with the middle school to help with the class sizes there. And the high school, every possible space that we can. This room is certainly utilized a lot, both during and after school. But we're also looking at any available space in this building as well.
How about, has it been considered to convert some of the administrative offices into common areas of work? Because today, the way people work is much different than years ago. Although we still have the office, we still have the desk phone, we still have the computer, many can work from laptops. So in the organization I worked for, we were forced to utilize the space more efficiently, and we redesigned all the office space to open space. So you share resources, secretaries are pulled together, administrators are pulled together in an open space, and offices are used for other things, like classrooms.
There are building codes where the administrative offices are right now, as much as I would love to give up the leaking areas or other things in that, there would be a lot that would have to be done to that building to bring it up to code, to bring any students into that building. In addition, then you add on the transportation cost.
I mean, even here, like in high school, if you needed extra space, and I'll just throw this out there, like you have offices where principals sit.
I think we're getting off the topic of this resolution.
It's consideration of space.
Yeah, I think that's a different resolution, but, so if there's any comments on this resolution, any other comments, questions, then we need to take a roll call.
Thank you.
One more. How many appraisals are we looking at on this? Are we looking at an appraisal for one specific property or two specific, or are you just looking for a broad ability to just do many appraisals?
Madam, once again, this resolution authorizes administration to have the flexibility to explore these properties pursuant to the board's goal of having a referendum and exploring all viable options for such. The appraisals, the use of professionals involved with this, in this case, are intended for this one particular parcel of land. However, the resolution, as I mentioned in the email before, was intended by Dr. Kozak to be broad enough so that if another opportunity showed itself in the near future, we wouldn't have to wait for a board meeting or call a special board meeting in order to have the authority to explore the feasibility of the land for presentation to the board's committee for a building project. So the intent is for one parcel of land, one consideration with this, but this does give the administration the authority to move on something else should it show itself. We are in charge of a $120 million budget every year, and the type of expenditures that you're talking about here are immaterial to this total project cost, which could be anywhere in the range of $100 to $150 million. And again, the intelligence gained from having these services performed is money well spent and will serve this board very well in determining and making a smart decision into which direction to go.
Okay, at this time, we'll have a roll call.
Mrs. Arminio.
Again, with my objection to the appraisals, however, if we do it prudently and we are apprised of the appraisals as they go on, for expedience sake, I'll vote yes.
Mr. Braverman. Yes. Mr. Chiarella.
No.
Mrs. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mrs. Lang.
Yes.
Mrs. Crino.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Russo.
Yes.
Mr. Rutsky is ineligible. Madam Board President, motion passes. And I would like to thank the board for the authority to allow administration to move freely into the exploration of these properties. We promise to do such with the concern about limited board resources in mind and the efficiency of what we're doing. The perfect audit that you saw last time hopefully demonstrates that we've earned that respect, and we will show that in these engagements. Thank you.
At this time, we'll go to the board president's report, and I'm going to try to keep this very short. One, the committee preference sheets for the committee lists and what you would like to be, what committees you'd like to sit on, will be handed out on Friday with the confidential. Really shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes of your time to look through it and decide what you'd like to sit on, which committees. And if I can get them by Monday, then I could start to put the committees together. And I know BG&T is one, that's very important that we start moving. So hopefully we can have some committees formed by next week and then get those moving. I know that we have in the past talked about having hard copies versus copies of the agenda on the computer. So I think we should take a survey as to how many of the board members want a hard copy of the agenda versus how many are going to be using the laptops, because I don't see laptops being utilized anymore. So does everybody still want a hard copy of Mr. Rutsky doesn't?
I don't know.
Ms. Arminio?
I would like it for the Friday before the board meeting with all of the paperwork, yes, because I do make notes on them. Other than that, the
So you want a copy of the backup
confidentials-
material too?
Yeah, the confidentials, I don't have a problem with reading online.
Ms. Carino? Of the agenda or everything? Everything? Mr. Russo?
Same, yeah, hard copy.
Mr. Everything for you? Mr. Chiarella?
I could do mine online.
You could do yours online. Mr. Ryback?
I got used to doing it online. I find that it's a fast update, because sometimes things change, and you have it on a Friday, my Tuesday could be, or Monday could be.
Right, could be changed.
So I'm always looking online anyway.
Okay, Mr. Mayo? Of everything, or just the agenda? Of everything? You're writing this down?
Yes, I'm good.
And Mrs. Lang?
Hard copies, please.
Hard copies, and I just need the agenda. Okay. I know that we talked about, there was people from the public who talked, and Ms. Arminio talked about a special board meeting just on the referendum. That is something that I think that we need to do. We'll be looking at, once we get more information and we'll be able to give more to the public, we can have a Q&A on just what's happening with the referendum, with the land, where we stand and things like that. So I hope to do that in the future. So that concludes the board president's report, and we'll go to other board business. Is there any member of the board who has Mr. Chiarella?
Thank you. Well, congratulations. So I just want to officially congratulate you, but I'm going to ask you to please, if you could, when you form the committees, to look at forming a committee that will be tasked with getting us more state aid. And I'm not talking about a letter writing campaign or some feel-good thing that will make everybody feel good and then we walk away and nothing happens, or we sit around with our legislators and they tell us how they're going to help us out, and then when push comes to shove, they get reelected, we don't hear from them again. What we need is a committee that's going to be tasked with getting us more money, reaching out to local politicians. We're in a really good position this year because we have a race. We're going to have a new governor, and we're going to have new state legislators. There's a lot of people that are up for re-election this coming November, and I think it puts us in a good place to be able to ask them what they're going to do with funding and with things like funding the funding formula. If we could just get a new governor, or one of the candidates, or both of the candidates, or however many candidates will be, sign on to just funding the funding formula, that would mean $10 million for our district. That's nearly 10% of our budget, and that would be relief, to our taxpayers. I think we owe it to our taxpayers, but we have to take this fight on. And if we can't do it as a board through the committee process, then we're going to have to do it outside of the board as citizens of the township, because I believe it has to be done. I think there's an opportunity to contact other districts, get those districts to sign on to a petition to get the funding formula funded, and make that step one. And I think there are 200 districts. We're number 25 of the least funded districts in the state. We're number 25, but there are 200 other districts that are in similar situations that we are. And if we look at those other factor groups and we align with those districts, I think that we have an opportunity to do something that's never been done before and put pressure on politicians and make them see the light. Because if 200 districts stand up and sign off and say, we want to be funded, then they're going to have to find funding, or they're going to lose their jobs. And that's what we have to tell these people, is that the only thing that they understand, that politicians understand, is losing. That if they think they're going to lose an election, then they're going to act. If their money comes from developers, and if their money comes from special interests, then that's who they're going to cater to. But if the voters stand up, and the voters speak up, and the voters demand what they're owed, I think they'll take note if there's enough fear put into them by having a mass movement. So with all that being said, I think I'm asking you to think about that committee.
Into that.
The other thing that I think we need to do is, as a town, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, is that we all need to come together for this fight. Because this is not a fight, an ideological fight. This is a fight between us to get what we need for our taxpayers to be able to survive here and to maintain our quality of life, or just having this whole thing blow away. Our district keeps growing. There's no resolve to stop that growth. And we're being put in a position where we have to fund that and fund those students either way. They have a right to be educated, and we need to educate them. But I think we also have a right to fight and to ask our elected officials to do the right thing. So, thank you.
I will look into that. Anyone else? Mr. DeMeo?
I know transparency is a big issue with this board, and we try to be as transparent as possible. So I went to the State Board of Ed meeting today, and it was a very crowded meeting, and it's in a very small room. We were not allowed in the room. The only people allowed in the room were the presenters, and we were put in another room with a video screen, and it wasn't even a live video screen. It was an audio with whoever was presenting their slides. And the audio was awful, and we didn't even know which state board members were attending that meeting. And I have to say, it was the most untransparent meeting I've ever been to, going to the State Board of Ed, and it was really a disgrace. I was completely disappointed. You could barely understand what half of the presenters were saying, and not even to have a live video screen was just awful. And they don't even put their meetings up afterwards. It was really bad. I was hugely disappointed. And ironically, they had a resolution in honor of school board members, and school board members could not attend the State's Board of Ed meeting. So we try hard, and I think we are doing well with that.
Thank you. Mr. Ryback?
Dr. Kozak, I hope I'm not going to be stealing some thunder from you by doing this, but I'd like to make mention of a meeting that you and I both attended just a few weeks ago, actually, in Franklin Township, and it was concerning charter schools. And I know that was a concern for this Board of Education just a few months ago also. What we learned really was that in this state, they look one way for public schools and another way for charter schools, meaning that the charter schools are supposed to serve just a certain geographical area, but they don't. They draw from outside that geographical area, even though they're not supposed to do so, and the State Board of Ed, or the State Education Department, looks the other way. They also have different requirements for hiring, both teachers and administrators. Our teachers have to meet certain certifications. Theirs don't. Our administrators have to meet certain certification. Theirs don't. As far as requirements for students, I think that's different also. They seem to take the top-tier students, and that leads to segregation. And that's something that's not acceptable to everyone. Just some things we have to think about, because this is also, Mr. Chiarella spoke very eloquently about a very serious problem. Mr. Mayo talked about, I guess, a lack of transparency, but I also look at it as a lack of respect toward board members here. But we also have another serious issue. We have an issue where there is, in my opinion, and I'm speaking just for myself now, a movement to do away with public education. And we need to look at this. It's a long-term fight, and we have to come up on top, because public education is really a foundation in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. No? Okay, moving on. We have a closed session resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe hereby moves to go into closed session in accordance with the Sunshine Law, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, NJSA 10:4-6 through 10:4-21, to discuss the following subjects: 1, receive attorney advice regarding the code of ethics for school board members. 2, an HIB incident. Following closed session, action may be taken. The discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public at such time as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Ms. Arminio, Mr. Rutsky, all in favor? Opposed? And do we have an idea how long this is going to take?
15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, about 20 minutes we'll be in closed session, and when we come out, there will be no other further public forum.
It's from a friend. It was the cheapest Corvette we probably ever get.
Okay. At this time, the board will move back into public session. And our next, we eliminated this second and third public forum. So our next scheduled Board of Education meeting will be Wednesday, January 25th, 2017 at 5 o'clock at the Monroe Township High School. And at 5 o'clock, the board will have training on data management system. And I'm assuming that we will have a regular meeting starting at 7 o'clock. So motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Ryback, Ms. Arminio, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.